The Great Canadian Talk Show.
There's only a couple of watts, but I brought the truth to everyone within 3 blocks of the west side of campus.
No way! Yes way!
And now, let's get right down to business with Marty Gold.
Welcome to the Great Canadian Talk Show podcast. Marty Gold this week, flying solo, and auxiliary recording facility being used. So if the audio isn't quite up to par, I apologize in advance, but I have a lot of very important information to get across to the community. A reminder, Great Canadian Talk Show, Season 2, Episode 19, and all our episodes are brought to you by Midpoint Auto. Vehicle sales at wholesale pricing, bad credit approved, good credit rewarded. If you're looking for a car, truck, van, SUV, something to drive around for the summer, even something to drive around for next winter, and they're not limited just to vehicles, off-road vehicles, boats, all sorts of things. It's got a motor, you like to drive it, they're the people you should get a hold of. 833-997-9930 and use our promo code TALK, T-A-L-K, and they will get you set up with exactly what you're looking for, and we benefit from their patronage as a result of your patronage of them. Supporting good, old-fashioned, digging your nails into the dirt, digging up the dirt on City Hall journalism right here, citizen journalism here. Thank you to Midpoint Auto for supporting our efforts. Please support them as well. You can donate via PayPal. That link is in the episode description for sponsorships, advertising, public speaking, or to book a CWE wrestling event. We've got Lorette coming up. I think it's Family Fun Days there. We are going to be going all throughout Saskatchewan and Manitoba coming up in the next few weeks. Nothing this coming week, so nothing I need to clue you folks into in particular. I'm actually off to Thunder Bay next weekend for the first time in my so-called wrestling career to host an event there. It's going to be big. It's going to be fun. And if you're interested, you think that this is suitable as a fundraiser for your organization, as just a fun event to put on for your group, your employees, your group of employees, your co-workers, etc., even for social occasions. These kinds of things can be tailored to meet the budget, to meet the kind of audiences being presented to. This is, generally speaking, CWE Wrestling, family-friendly fun, and as often as possible, I get out to the shows here in Winnipeg, across Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and now Alberta, and the liaison, so to speak, getting across what's happening to the crowd and making sure that as much as I can, that everything goes as smoothly as possible with a minimal number of injuries, especially to myself. Today we're going to have, in the back end, crime courts public safety update. You're going to want to listen to that, as well as some news, a little bit of news from the legislature. But here we are, and it's now part 5 of our ongoing series, to my surprise, about the Moving on Marion project. And every week, as I said, early on, the more I ask questions, the more I ask businesses in St. Boniface about the roadway changes planned for outside their front doors, the worse it got. And so this is just a bottomless pit of incompetence, a bottomless pit of what looks like, I have to say, some kind of corruption at this stage, based on the city's past experience with these things. Our first episode and these podcasts have been converted to YouTube. Again, you can go to our YouTube channel, TGCTS, and you can see the illustrated versions. Facts hidden at St. Boniface Bike Lane Open House. Like how many parking spots were being proposed to be lost? Why is there a proposed bike lane on Traverse? How many cyclists actually are creating the demand for this? How many are using Eugenie? None of those were answered at the open house. The second installment, more facts were missing at the St. Boniface bike lane meeting because it pulled a double cross. The plan pulled a double cross on Scotiabank and on the bike lobby. They don't want some of these lanes where they're being put, believe it or not, because it's not according to the plan that the city came to in 2021. So basically, a fake plan, false information put in front of the public at that open house I attended in March. And parking taking away right beside the Scotiabank at Traverse and Marion serves a lot of seniors, a lot of other people. And the vice president, who I will be speaking again with this week, the vice president told me that as far as he could tell, they had no information, no heads up. So the public, the people that are clued in, get invited to these meetings. They go, oh, bike lanes, that's wonderful. But nobody gets told what the other side is. And as I've learned, the biz did not, the Nord Grove biz representing the businesses on Marion and the urban area, not just Marion, but the urban area, Marion, Goulet, and those side streets, I guess, in St. Boniface, did not get an invitation. The biz in total disarray, and that's not all. The Marion Street businesses kept in the dark out the bike lane plan. Or as Spirited Kenny put it, what's going on here? What open house? The public consultation, as I found out, was done by consultants, not by city staff. And I said, this is a redo of the 2010 Battle of the Bike Lanes and one-sided public processes like we saw in Happy Land Park. And I mean, I was saying it sure looked like it's like, my spider sense was tingling, and with good reason. Winnipeg is no stranger to rigged public consultations influencing urban planning. And on Facebook, as this controversy has grown, and as the episodes, the podcast and the YouTube episodes, have been put in the various Facebook groups, whether it's Wise Up Winnipeg, certainly the St. Boniface, St. Vital group, and a couple of others, the Happy Land Park group. The comments from people watching this and reading this material and hearing it points to a slanted open house process even before March 18th, which led us to part 4, last week, episode 18. Marion Street homeowner blasts bike lane plan. Too many lies, businesses will close. Well, same MO, as Kenny said, as what we saw in the past, that the audit of the Assiniboine bike lane, accepted unanimously by City Council in January 2012, set out standards. And yet these standards are, again, not being met, and you're paying your taxes through the nose to pay the consultants to do a piss-poor, if not biased, job. I interviewed a homeowner losing frontage under the plan. That was episode 18 last week, part 4. What did she say about her experience going to the open house? All the questions she had? What's going to happen to our taxes? Oh, we didn't think of that. It was a shit show. Once again, in this city, it seems to be acceptable to invite people on one side of the street and not on the other side of the street. And I've since learned that's not only with the bike lane plan, to clue people into major changes in the St. Boniface neighborhood. She called the Marion process a farce. And so this episode, the YouTube version, it's good because she had sharp comments, I have to say. Reminiscent of the work we did on Kick FM, the work that no other radio station this day does in Winnipeg. No television stations report on any of this. They report on, bike lanes are coming to Marion and Goulet. Oh, livability. Blah, blah, blah. All the buzzwords that are attached to it. But they never look beneath the surface to see what's really going on. That's what Marty Gold does, since no one else wants to do it. And so we turn to some comments from Facebook about what's gone on here. And lo and behold, we know that there's, how do I put this? We know that this is putting some noses out of joint because Matt Allard, the councilor for St. Boniface, who's been silent through this whole thing, bellyaches continuously about snow clearing on sidewalks. But while his own neighborhood is crumbling, Goulet virtually impassable, vehicles unable to stay in their lanes because they're running into craters. It looks like a bomb site in behind the poor patrons of the Marion Hotel trying to get in and out of the lot, the people going to A&W, the people going to the Wave Car Wash. Allard, with potholes growing all over this neighborhood where our office has been located for over a baker's dozen of years, actually, I guess the way it would be put. His former assistant, current school trustee, Ryan Palmquist, started to air his views and opinions on Facebook in conversation with various residents who he formerly served, so to speak, as Allard's assistant. Ryan Palmquist, having it made clear to him that the new bike lanes ties in with the crumbling roads and people's point of view of what's going on in my neighborhood. And one person called it a silent backdoor agenda. He goes silent, Ryan Palmquist says. There's been public consultations for 4 years, 4 public meetings, multiple mailouts, dozens of posters, social media posts, websites, and so on. If this is supposed to be a secret, it's the worst kept secret I've ever seen. And so this person asked me, tagging Ryan too, is that true? I said, well, I stand by my reporting. They can brag about City Hall, people affiliated with City Hall, like Palmquist, the bike lobby, can brag about this process all they want. But on the face of it, every single business I've spoken to, did not get any notice about the open house, had no idea there were bike lanes proposed to take away their parking. And if people associated with City Hall in this project had any shame, they'd be feeling it right now. Instead, they gloat about how great their fake public consultation was. Ryan Palmquist then responding, it was literally the then executive director of the Norwood Business Improvement Zone who was one of the key champions of this vision and was involved every step of the way. I'm not sure what you're talking about. And as I replied to Palmquist, and as I've told this audience repeatedly, that's news to the new executive director of the biz. And keep that in mind because I go back to the biz about this subject. But here's Ryan Palmquist, who would know as much as anybody because he was Matt Allard's right and left hand pretty much for a number of years at City Hall. He says, oh, the biz is all for it. But the businesses were left out. He then goes and makes a comment, Ryan Palmquist does, formerly paid by the taxpayer as Allard's assistant, currently paid by the taxpayer as a school trustee, and my understanding is the job he jumped to from City Hall with Save Our Saying is also, that position is also significantly subsidized by city taxpayers through a grant. Here's a guy who for a number of years, whatever else Ryan does, he certainly benefits from the public purse. Not disputable. Another huge conspiracy that only Marty's been able to sniff out. I've heard this story before. Are you fundraising off it? Imagine the nerve of an individual paid for by the taxpayer complaining about independent journalism, reporting on stories that CBC won't touch. I made the remark back to him, you seem to have a problem with investigative journalism. Hardly a surprise, you're an elected politician now. Only one reporter, I point out, has spoken to the new director of the Norwood Grove Biz to confirm if they support this and ask if their members were notified about the open house I've fundraised based on all my work, including election coverage and not only this project. Another individual saying that his comment was incredibly greasy, very greasy, it says, incredibly greasy and very low class. That seems to reek of cover-up. And he comes back, with this concept. I asked him, did you listen to my podcast? He goes, oh, thanks for the answer. A good business model. In other words, I stir up shit over nothing. Really? Well, I'm going to repeat to this audience what I said to him. Supporting my investigative work, breaking news that affects the taxpayers is a good business model. And I asked him, what information was presented to the biz members and residents about the number of lost parking spaces at those public meetings you referred to? Well, there's the point. Now, I put this out in the podcast. I asked this at that open house in March. I was not given an answer for 2 weeks until, of all things, and I genuinely am thankful. I think I mentioned this previous podcast. I might have, I might not have. On Twitter, as these debates were going on, not involving Ryan Palmquist, just to be clear, and not really involving Matt Allard directly, the person who succeeded Matt Allard as Public Works Chair on Twitter, I was circulating the podcast, so I tagged the Norwood Biz Grove and other associated entities, right, in the course of a conversation on Twitter. Janice Lukes very kindly sends in a screen capture, an image of something that comes from the city administration. I don't know if it was created as a result of her making an inquiry after my investigation started pointing out what appear to be deficiencies in this so-called public consultation, or if this is a document that existed previously that was not divulged, not revealed, clearly at any of the meetings I've heard about or at the open house. Numbers for current state versus proposed with the installation of a unidirectional bike lane on both Marion and Goulet. These are specific to the Marion-Goulet couplet area. So the current is in red, proposes in green, and it's got 3 categories and two sections being discussed, the Marion section, the Goulet section. Available spaces when no restrictions are in place, so outside of the rush hours. Right now on Marion, there's 207, and on Goulet, 52, a total of 259. Under the proposal, thanks to Public Works Chair Janice Lukes, we now know that the nominal number of parking spots will be 184. That's a reduction. My Fay Hodgman, Joseph Lindsay Collegiate High School math tells me that's a reduction of 75 spots. 75. Not the 25 that was hinted at by one of the consultants at the open house to me. 75. But that's not all. Now, during rush hour, morning rush hour, right now on Marion, that 207 is reduced to 124 because of various stretches where parking isn't allowed to facilitate the flow of traffic. Okay? Now, on Goulet right now, because there's a bus lane in the mornings, the number of available spaces in morning rush hour is 0. And this plan proposes to raise it to 60. So, in morning rush hour, St. Boniface will go from 207 spaces to 184. There's going to be a reduction on Marion of 83 spaces during morning rush hour. So people that park there because they're going to work, early morning appointments, there's doctors, there's dentists, there's home care, valuable home services to senior citizens and others in that neighborhood. They're going to try to make up for the loss. So the net loss looks like it's only 23, but they're going to put 60 of those spots on Goulet. Now you ask yourself, how many people really want to walk from about November 15th to about April the 1st when they're going someplace on Marion and have to find a spot on Goulet and that's a long block. There's no cut throughs. You can't cut through yards and then go across the back lane. So you're going all the way to the corner and right. How many people want to do that walk from Marion to go to where from Goulet rather, to go to where they have to go on Marion? Now, during the afternoon rush hour, currently on Marion, 176 spaces. This would be reduced to 124, a loss of 52. On Goulet, available in rush hour now is 41. It would go up to 60. So the idea is to give Goulet a standard 60 parking spots at all times of the day. And that would bring it up to 184. So right now there's 217 in afternoon rush hour. It would go to 184. Again, a loss of 33 spots. But that's not all that we're losing, because the bus lane on Goulet will be gone and traffic on Goulet will be squeezed into 2 lanes, with the bus lumbering in and out of a lane that is blocked off by those curb bump outs that nobody likes. So if you want to turn right to go down Kenny, down Traverse, for whatever reason, you are, instead of pulling into the curb lane where there's no parking towards the corners and zipping around the corner, they want you to turn from in traffic. This is going to back traffic up indisputably. Now I have the parking numbers and I send an email to the biz saying I want to speak directly again to you. And I've pasted in a comment made by Matt Allard's former assistant, right? That is that this was supported, championed by her predecessor. And I ask, can you provide me with the minutes from your board meetings to establish that the biz directors were aware of her activity on their behalf and ratified her decisions? And I'm seeking other documentation, emails, reports, update bulletins, flyers that would outline how and when the biz members on Marion, on Goulet, on those side streets were informed by her and surveyed for their opinions, concerns. Have you contacted your members yet about their exclusion from the open house? In previous podcasts, I've proven there's at least a dozen businesses had no idea that parking that affects their ability to get deliveries, to serve customers, to be a viable business was being discussed. The city was encouraging people to go along with this plan at their expense. The response, Norwood Grove Biz, is organizing an open house with our members about the moving on Marion to listen to their voices and see what they have to say about this plan. That's all I can tell you right now. Thank you. No answer about minutes. I've called an official from the city because I believe that any of us should be able to access the minutes of this nonprofit, particularly the annual general meeting. Certainly any business person I've talked to there, people have been there for longer than 20 years, 7 years, 4 years. They don't seem to have known anything about this. But now the biz, who people like Ryan Palmquist says champion this, the biz is having to hold an emergency meeting with their members to listen to their voices and what they have to say about this plan. I wanted to ask the biz, the executive director, do you know about the amount of parking that's being lost? I want to provide that information. She doesn't want to talk with me. I guess she'll learn about it like the rest of you are on the Great Canadian Talk Show podcast.
Do you have a comment, story tip, or want to advertise or support the Great Canadian Talk Show podcast? Email tgcts1@gmail.com, join the Facebook group, or follow us on Twitter @TGCTS. You have the power.
The Great Canadian Talk Show podcast is brought to you by Midpoint Auto, vehicle sales at wholesale pricing. 1.99% financing on new cars, 6.99% financing on great used vehicles. Cars, trucks, vans, SUVs, that's not all. Off-road vehicles, campers, snowmobiles, dirt bikes, even boats. If you're in the market for something with an engine, then that's the place you want to go. MidpointAutomotive.ca. The phone number, 833-997-9930. Again, that's 833-997-9930. Midpoint Auto, bad credit approved, good credit rewarded. If you're a listener of the Great Canadian Talk Show podcast, let them know by giving them the promo code, TALK, the word talk. That's the promo code, and you're sure to get a great deal from Midpoint Automotive. So that now that the biz can tell their members, although I've already told a few about the actual loss of parking, the degree of it. Oh, and there's another point I want to make, actually. It's worse than what I've described. We're looking at numbers of 75, generally speaking, and 30 or 40, I think it would be 25 to 40 during rush hours. But it's worse than that, because I forgot to mention the 24 lost spots on Traverse. So that's 24 plus 75 equals 99. 99? 99. Clearly thought up under a cone of silence by chaos and their agents in the bike lobby and this consulting company and these other engineers. All of them are happy to go along with this, but nobody ever wonders, what about the effect on the community? Because they don't live here. They don't give a shit about the people of St. Boniface. Unfortunately for them, I do. Now, public policy dictates that transit use is to be encouraged. Yet we see they propose to take away a bus lane on Goulet, cripple traffic in and out of the neighborhood north of Goulet. And remember, I asked at that open house, what traffic studies have you done about the neighborhood near the hospital? And I was told they had done none. How does it encourage transit use to take away the bus lane that's used exclusively priority bus service going towards downtown and from 7 to 9 a.m.? Now, meanwhile, here's CKY, Janice Lukes, our pal. She does a spot with Clay Young, Cassius Clay. People don't think councillors take the bus, but I take the bus. Why not? It's super easy. Not going to be as easy when you don't have that priority bus lane going towards downtown in the mornings through St. Boniface. Well, what are the why nots? Clay Young, I don't think, asked, because he didn't see that as the purpose of what he was doing. And I understand, different news items have different purposes. I've been there. So Clay Young didn't mention unreliable service, non-paying scofflaws, intoxicated passengers, the violence, bear spray, machetes, people getting pissed on. Councillors, in my opinion, need to ride at night, just like the plebes do, to see the full scope of the dysfunction, and none of them do. Now, I made this comment on Twitter, and lo and behold, a former school trustee saying, is there even a bus shelter near City Hall that isn't being lived in? Barbara, another person, longtime listener of our program on Kick FM and to our podcasts, she said, I found it safer to walk to a further bus stop from where I worked in the Exchange District than get on that bus after a few experiences of intimidation, badgering riders for money, screaming and yelling. Another guy saying, well, I drove down McDermott near Health Sciences Center with snowbank windows, cycle lanes, a single lane for cars, and people who park need to turn their mirrors in so there's enough room to get by. And no doubt, there's no comment from the area councillor about the effect on McDermott in the Exchange District side of it. Now, I've talked with a couple of businesses here in the course of doing this research that moved from downtown and moved from the Exchange District to come here. They moved because they've seen this scene before. Well, now we know. Let me recap. We know that there's at least 99 parking spaces being targeted under this bike lane plan that was not disclosed to anybody at any one of the meetings that I've been able to find. You'd think that that's important information, because now I'm admitting to you, I don't know the number of parking spots on a couple of the other stretches off of Goulet. There's very few on Kenny, beside the 7-Eleven and towards or coming from the no frills between Marion and Goulet. So it's just a few spots there. I don't think there's any parking at all on Taché between Marion and Goulet. There would be, I think, maybe on Eugenie. So we're looking at, when I add in these 24, it's 99 spots. We know that the total number is 259 plus 24 is 283 spots. What's 99 at 283? It's more than 33%. It's pushing 40% of the parking. Pushing 40% of the parking is at risk. What happens when you take away 100 spots, basically, from a neighborhood? Well, guess what? The city is right now engaging in a live. They're about to engage in a live laboratory experiment with promoting this kind of chaos in Osborne Village. An email from a listener, again, somebody who used to be on our radio show. They have a job where I prefer not to identify them, but they're well experienced at City Hall processes. Actually, they're smarter about some of these processes, way smarter than I am, because of their own experience in business and live event management and other things. Further to your bike paths on Marion and Goulet, a forecast of what will likely happen is that construction will start next year, and only then will people realize what it means. I attempted to go to an info session at the church, and this is about Osborne Village, only to find the doors locked and no hours posted. I don't live in the area, so I just gave up, but they do business in the area. I know that under the construction plan, it removes 100 parking spaces, including loading zones, handicap spots on the north side of the road, meaning river. And this issue of the ability of the disabled to be able to access services, to get to appointments when a bike lane is in the way of vehicles that are side loading and unloading, that's a substantial problem, trying to get a 300-pound motorized wheelchair and a human being when there's an 8-inch drop to the pavement because the platform can't go all the way to the ground because there's a bike lane curb there. I have to tell you, I didn't even think of asking how many loading zones are going to be affected or wiped out. Well, let's look at the experiment that's about to happen in Osborne Village. This affects businesses, apartment loading zones in favor of the parking, which has meaning the bike lane, which has a protective curb around it. They're talking, I think, about the bump outs. Sherbrooke's bike lane proceeds on the south side of the road where parking is generally not allowed, but it has loading zones almost the entire length of it, including handicap loading. I'm not sure who designed this, but I can't imagine when shovels hit the ground in June, there won't be some red hot anger. Do you hear that, city councilors? Call your city councilors, send them a link to this, and let them know there's going to be red hot anger, according to somebody who's pretty smart when it comes to what goes on with this stuff. In Osborne Village, the gold standard remains Sherbrooke, I'm told, where a bike lane was built without affecting parking or loading zones between the bridge, meaning the Maryland Bridge, and Portage Avenue. Not sure why this was not considered for one of these two streets. And I think this also means Marion and Goulet. It's possible to do these things and have the community buy in, as we saw with Sherbrooke. As it stands now, Osborne Village loses 100 spots of parking, tons of loading and handicap spaces. Goulet, turning our attention back to St. Boniface, is a poor candidate for a bike lane at 3 lanes and with the hospital right at the end. Marion has possibilities because with 4 lanes, you could have parking protected bike lanes where you keep loading zones, parking and handicap priority areas. The example again is Sherbrooke with a hospital right there. When you actually get out and talk to people directly, you can find out if it works and enhances the neighborhood. I'd hate to see small businesses collapse because they lost their loading zone and parking. I love that area of town. Why is there a determination, this listener asks, to put paths in places where it is clear they have not got a clear idea who live and work there? It would be best to go back to the drawing board before they get what Osborne Village will see in June. The loss of 100 parking spots there will make people suffer. This guy did not know that the loss here was going to be that number. It's a magic coincidence, isn't it? It's always, put in bike lanes for a few blocks on thoroughfares in our most valuable neighborhoods. Mixed-use neighborhoods. So, what did you just hear this listener suggest? That the consultants, that the city engineers, that the city councilors, they don't go and talk with the people to find out what will and won't work. Well, I did. I took it to the streets, Doobie Brothers style, with a flyer. distributing a flyer with basic information, guiding people to the YouTube video, explaining my experience as somebody who's been here for, I said a baker's dozen, 13 years. And I decided, time to go talk with the people. And I went up and down Allard Boulevard. Why Allard Boulevard? Because when traffic is backed up on Goulet, and you've got 2 lanes of traffic, and now instead of being able to pull into the curb lane on the right to turn right, you're going to be sitting in the traffic lane, in a travel lane. Somebody's turning right and left, traffic stopped. Okay? It stopped, and that's all there is on Goulet. What happens when your grandmother, your uncle, your brother-in-law, a child suffers a heart attack, a stroke, a catastrophic accident, and that ambulance coming down, say, Archibald, right? And goes down Marion and then tries to navigate the bombed out craters on Goulet, and then they're all backed up. What's going to happen when they finally get towards the hospital? Those ambulances, fire trucks, whatever, they're going to start making their way onto Allard Boulevard, which is the street that leads straight into the front door of the hospital. It's sort of earmarked at the hospital. The hospital on one side, on the west side of Taché, and then on the east side of Taché, there's 400 Taché. It's, I think, 8 stories with medical offices and a really good, couple of good restaurants. 2 good restaurants, actually, a deli and used to be a Chinese restaurant, but they've replaced it with something else now, and a pharmacy on the main floor, right? And on the other side is La Vérendrye Park. Okay, so it's a street that goes in and out of the front door of St. Boniface Hospital. Doesn't go all the way to Des Muron. It's cut off just before Des Muron. I went and I canvassed that neighborhood. 13 people I spoke with on Saturday. Another 9 on Sunday. I spoke with 14 people on their doorstep. The first fellow, 88 years old, had no idea of this plan. Clued out. His property value is going to be affected one way or the other in his view. Certainly not impressed, having been there longer than I've been alive, to find out that he could have ambulances with their sirens wailing, using Allard as a detour because Goulet is too congested, because vehicles don't have room to get out of the way of the emergency vehicles. But that's not all. Of these people I talked with, of the 14 at their houses on Allard, one had heard that there was an open house. They saw the postcard. They and one other person knew what moving on Marion meant. This is out of the people with the houses. 2 of them had heard about moving on Marion because they'd heard about the podcasts. So I'm doing at least as good as the city consultation so far at creating awareness that the public is supposedly being asked for feedback on this plan. 22 people total I spoke with. Now, some were people who live in the neighborhood or on Allard itself, but some would live, let's just say, down Allno or something. I'd ask, do you live nearby? Yeah, I'm just going over there. So there's 9 other people, a waitress at a local restaurant, a couple of, there are about 5 guys in their 20s. Housewife with a small child, a professional woman who's on her mat leave, and might I add, not from Canada originally, that was very interested in this. And a few senior citizens in their homes, right? Tradespeople in their homes. Clearly, at least, at least to a minimum of 2 genders, okay, participated in this exercise with me. I talked to 22 people. None of them heard of the Kenny Street Greenway. That's the plan to put bike lanes on Kenny that the city apparently decided on in 2021, but the open house didn't mention. And instead they show these bike lanes on Traverse. Guess how many knew about these bike lanes on Traverse? 0, including properties that border on Traverse. And the deal on Kenny? Same thing. House on that corner? No idea. Does that make any sense? Of course it doesn't. None of them knew the bus lane on Goulet was being removed, or about the bump outs to slow traffic further. And that when you start dicking around with parking, this is going to migrate parking. There's a ripple effect. It's going to go on the south side of Marion towards Eugenie and Horace, and it'll come back to the Allard side, okay, on Bertrand and other streets, Thomasberry, okay, and then to Allard. And this is important because we have a hospital here, and I called somebody at the WHA, and I've asked questions of the WRHA. And they were very concerned with the information I was providing. Now, I understand that ambulances are a city service. So the hospital may not initially have thought about this because they assume the city's consulted with their own ambulance service about, will this plan affect response? How is response already being affected by narrowed streets and curbs and bump outs? And good questions, eh? I'm starting to ask them. I'm waiting for answers from the WRHA. They were very kind to me in the conversation. And this will also affect the ability of people to get to work on time, to get to their appointments on time. So when you have employees of the hospital, anyone coming from the east, a Goulet's going to be backed up like that. And then also access from Traverse going to be narrowed down. And it's already, I'm not up in the mornings. I'm hearing how bad it is mornings and the afternoon rush hours around the Allard neighborhood. This area of St. Boniface is not represented by any residents organization. So similar to how the Biz didn't invite their own members to the open house, and the Biz seems to have been put together by the previous executive director, who, in my opinion, had a fiduciary duty to the members that seems to have been compromised, if not failed. And this should be brought up at the open house with the Biz members. What are they paying for? Exactly. Because it isn't to defend the businesses. Well, nobody defends the community, and the Biz certainly didn't. They didn't even invite their members because the members would have gone there and said, hey, my customers that live in this neighborhood, how are we supposed to be able to serve them? They're coming from downtown. They come from wherever they drive. They pick up their flowers. They pick up their pizza. They pick up this. They pick up that. They want to do some shopping, and now they can't. We're defining the quality of life here strictly by what's best for cyclists, because the only people that benefit from moving on Marion, not the handicapped, not the businesses, not the residents. But if you got a $2,000 bike, you're a winner. How many trees are going to come down? Urban heat zones, right? Urban heat deserts. The difference could be 20 degrees or more. It could be the difference between the street being 45 or 45 degrees Celsius or being like 27. There's no plan for a park and ride. What kind of a plan is this? Why, if you want to get people to take the bus, are you taking away a bus lane and not thinking about a park and ride on the Canada Packers lands or someplace? So the people coming from Southdale, from our old buddies in Sage Creek, right? Coming from Royalwood, coming from Windsor Park, Southdale. Why is there no ideas for a park and ride? Makes you wonder, doesn't it? This is a dense area with high traffic and two chokehold points at Provencher Bridge and the Marion Bridge. And this is going to spill over onto Provencher too. So anybody on the Old St. Boniface Residents Association that does not represent this neighborhood, does not speak up for this neighborhood. Now, I'm not saying they do or don't support this, but anybody in Old St. Boniface, the other side of Provencher, the north side of Provencher, right, where all the new condos are, they might think this is a great idea. Thanks for coming up with ideas that aren't so good for our neighborhood. Again, I'm not saying the organization itself does or doesn't, but I'm saying people individually, like people in Norwood Flats. Oh, we want to ride our bikes. We want to be able to go to Marion and Goulet. Really? You do? How about you create your own retail area over there and ride your bike there? But you want to come here, and you want to come here in a manner that is detrimental to this neighborhood, to the viability of the businesses, to the viability of the safety on our streets. You want ambulances shortcutting down, and nobody's against saving lives. You want ambulances all of a sudden having to come down because the streets were made narrower? The main thoroughfares, Route 115 was made narrower? This will slow commuters, and whether we like it or not, people commute through this area to go downtown, go to the West End, go to Polo Park, go to Fort Rouge, go to Osborne Village. Normally, in proper planning, you think about these things. Park and ride. Priority bus lanes. Then you have the bike lane sort of melded in with that. That's called proper planning. What do we have in Winnipeg? Improper planning. Now, were there previous proposals, designs that considered priority transit and then were dismissed? Like, if this isn't in the final design, why isn't it? This is going to slow down bus service indisputably through St. Boniface. So instead of making bus service better, they're going to make it more unreliable. It will be faster. to walk from Archibald and Marion, to walk from the Tims. It'll be faster to walk downtown than to drive it. And when it's faster to walk than to drive, when it's faster to walk than to take a bus, you're creating a big problem. And what was it called in the Anticipation Osborne Village? Red hot anger. And we aren't even talking about the safety factor of the buses, which is why I mentioned it before. If you plan transit through the area and park and rides, you might even get commuters into that. But this goes above and beyond the area residents and our businesses. The traffic flow is going to be altered all the way to Provencher. And then when you start screwing around with that, that goes into a tourist area by the Forks, and it's by a hospital. More traffic. But they don't care. We know they don't care. Councilor Allard was happy when bus service was cut on Sundays to the St. Boniface Hospital. He thought a couple years ago that was a great idea. There's more factors to this. Developments that are restricting traffic, like parking allowances, number of parking spots, but not improving transit. I see some aspects of how it's going to affect property values, but I don't want to get too deep into that right now. The flyers are out. Attention, Dollard Boulevard area residents and property owners. If you know people in that area, send me an email, martygoldlive@gmail.com. I'll get them a flyer. We're providing, I'll be providing people that contact me with a link to a survey just to get an idea. Who knew about this? What do they think? What do they know? What are they concerned about? Are they concerned about what's going to happen to St. Boniface Hospital? Let me tell you something right now. The WHA is going to be getting back to me, and I bet you dollars to donuts they're going to have some concerns. And I'm going to be very interested whether they were given a chance to raise those concerns ahead of time, or if the loss of parking spots and how it's going to ripple through the neighborhood and what's going to happen to ambulances, whether anybody raised this at all. So you want to know why people, elected politicians like Ryan Palmquist, don't like journalists like myself doing this kind of work? Don't you think the city councilor or his assistant would normally, it would be their business to make sure that 14 homeowners and tenants in their doorways on Dollard knew about this? 22 people I spoke with, only 2 knew about this. There was no public consultation, and the same way as they're taking advantage, this bike lobby, these urban visionaries are taking advantage of the biz and the disarray in the biz. They are taking advantage of the neighborhood around St. Boniface Hospital. Over my dead body, they will. Back with more after this.
The Great Canadian Talk Show is brought to you by The Hive Hair Company. From classic to funky, the styles of your life are at The Hive, in the heart of the Osborne Village at 175 Osborne. Call 452-4483 or online, thehivehaircompany.com.
With Barry Street, with Assiniboine, with McDermott, with Nassau in 2010. And yet still this just naked flaunting of the public consultation guidelines is continuing. Like, there's no way Janice Lukes or any city councilor should accept that on one street of 14 residents, and this is just like a sample. But as Man in the Street interviews goes, there's pretty significant that and they all talked about their concern about what would happen and that this made no sense. One guy's a cyclist himself, he bikes to work morning, takes his car. He said, this is nuts. Nobody biking in this neighborhood would go there. You're going down these streets here. Aulneau and Jeanne d'Arc and streets like that. Or you go to Taché. So the fact that the businesses were left out and the neighborhood that will be most affected because the hospital's our biggest employer and that they were like completely left out. It's not just wrong, but we're paying a lot of money to see the same things happen again. Does nobody give the consultants a handbook and say, here's our guidelines, here's our rules? Or do they make up this shit as they go along while their friends in the vested interests in the urban visionary field get clued in everything? Then all of a sudden, 97% of people support this. Bullshit! Try that in the 5 blocks to the east of the hospital to Provenche. Try that all the way down to Della Morini and see what kind of reaction you get. I dare you, City Hall. I dare you. You won't do it. Nobody will do it. Because then you'd actually hear, as was described with Osborne Village, what happens when people who live there can talk intelligently about what the effect is. This isn't to say bike lanes aren't a good idea where they fit, but this idea is clearly somebody's in it for something. I just haven't figured out what it is yet, but I will.
Do you have a comment, story tip, or want to advertise or support the Great Canadian Talk Show podcast? Email tgcts1@gmail.com, join the Facebook group, or follow us on Twitter @TGCTS. You have the power.